You're watching Cable 2.
Welcome to the Brunson Elementary School Community Meeting. We hope this presentation answers a lot of your questions. However, because we cannot hold a traditional town hall meeting and want to answer many of your questions, as many as possible, once we complete this presentation, we will ask that you send an email to the following email address: brunsonoptions@wsfcs.k12.nc.us. Brunson Options at Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools. And so again, this email address will appear several times throughout the presentation. Chief Communications Officer Brent Campbell will be monitoring this account. And when we are finished with the presentation, he will moderate a live question and answer section. He will share your answers, your questions with us, one of the panel members. We will have them introduce themselves just before the Q&A section. And we will begin to record, again, answers so that we can keep track of them and get them out to the general public. So today, we have a presentation of options for Brunson Elementary School. We are excited about a new school. Winston-Salem Forsyth County is excited about a new Brunson Elementary. I visited Brunson, and we have several schools that certainly need some type of renovation or newness in nature, but I can tell you that we are ready for a new Brunson. What we're here to do today is to secure feedback from those who are on the call. We've been staff members, and we are looking for feedback from you all about location. We have three options that will be presented to you today. We will present some pros and cons of each of the options, but we want to hear from you. This is certainly not a debate. It is feedback opportunity for us, and we will take those the data from the surveys and questions, present that to our Board of Education. Our Board of Education is led by Chair Shay Woodbury, Vice Chair Lyda Calvert-Hayes, and we have a Buildings and Grounds Committee working with facilities, and that is led by Chair Leah Crowley. And so we're excited to be able to bring this presentation to you via Facebook Live with a combination of Zoom. And what I might do is just so we know who's on the call and the amount of interest in this, let's do introductions first rather than waiting till the Q&A. So we'll start with we'll just start with you, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Wesley. If you'll unmute your mic, Mr. Wesley.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Harris. My name is Wesley Curtis. I'm an architect on the project with Walter Robbs, Callahan, and Pierce Architects, and looking forward to getting started on the project.
My name is Nick. I'm with Gilbane Building Company, and we'll be the ones constructing the new Brunson Elementary School.
Sarah?
I'm Aubrey Linville with Linville Team Partners. We're on the site selection team. We're located here on 4th Street in downtown Winston-Salem.
Okay. Grace?
Hi, I'm Grace Hall. I'm project architect with Wesley Curtis at Walter Robbs Architects. Look forward to working on this project. It's very exciting.
Sarah?
I'm Sarah Huddleston. I'm the assistant principal at Brunson Elementary, and we are thrilled to get a new building.
Darryl Walker?
Hey, I'm Darryl Walker, Assistant Superintendent of Operations with Salem Forsyth County Schools.
Sam?
Hello, I'm Sam Mills, Chief of Staff, Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools.
And we have both of our principals with us today. We have Principal Wilkins.
Paula Wilkins, Principal, Cook Literacy Model School. Looking forward to hearing more about the option.
Okay. And I don't want to, I guess, so our presentation today will be led by Colin Moore, our Director of New Construction and Facilities. And so we'll turn it over to you, Mr. Moore.
All right, thank you, Dr. Apologize, I'm a little slow in unmuting. Just a couple other people I wanted to recognize. I don't know that they got to introduce themselves. That will be part of the any question answer is Wayne Watterson with SNME Engineering, the testing firm that's done some testing at both the Patterson Avenue and the Brunson Elementary School sites. Also joining me on the presentation today is Nick Seba. Nick is a project manager in the construction and planning department, and Nick's actually going to be running the slideshow today. With so many of us participating, we thought it'd be easier for just one person. So appreciate appreciate your patience as we try to navigate from one location and talk on another one. So we'll go ahead and run through. Next slide is just some introductions that I think we've already done. So Nick, you can kind of blow through that. Just thank you to the executive cabinet that's on our discussion today, and you'll be hearing from those that have introduced themselves. First thing we want to show you is the schedule of how we got to where we are. I know this is hard to see for those of you that are watching on Cable 2, but I'll kind of talk in colors. The blue box you see at the top is basically when this bond was approved by the voters in November of 2016. After that approval, we went through some site evaluations process. We'll talk about those in a little bit more detail a little bit later. Another one of the things that was done early in the process was the selection of a designer. Walter Robbs Architects was selected by a committee to be the architect for a new Brunson Elementary School. That selection was made in early 2017 with the understanding that the design would not start for a couple of years. Another thing that we did was selected a construction manager for the project. Gilbane Building Company was selected as the construction manager in late 2017 as we began to prepare and start reviewing some pre-construction options. You can see also on the pink that the design programming got started in kind of mid-2019. We started having some discussions. That will be followed. You'll see the vertical red line will be, that's our data date, if you will. We will be doing more design once the site is selected. We've got probably 8 to 10 months of design once we select the site. That's the remaining pink. And then the green piece that you see going forward is the construction. We're anticipating about a 2-year time frame for construction, with occupancy expected in 2023, as you can see from this show. We have a couple numbers on the bottom, a couple numbers in blue that indicate some community meetings, some programming discussions that we had with staff, some other instructional team meetings, some community meetings that we've had during the process. We want to emphasize the purpose of today's information is not to establish programming for Brunson. The meetings we've had to date have been more in focus of what does Brunson do now? What is the program at Brunson now? So we're not making any programming decisions. That will come as the design development goes a little bit further. So I want to just kind of let you know where we are on that schedule. So if we'll go to the next slide, Nick. I have a couple of slides that show the aerial of what's going on the 3 sites. This is an outline of the existing Brunson site. You can see it bordered to the north by Glade Street, to the west or to the left by Hawthorne Avenue, and then bordered on the south by First Street. Again, this is the existing Brunson site. Next. The existing Cook site is located within the red lines you see here, bordered on the north by 11th Street, on the left or on the west by Thurman Street. You can see Hayward Street come along on the east and the south sides of the existing Cook site. Next. This is the Patterson Avenue site that's located between Patterson Avenue and Ivy Avenue, south of Northwest Boulevard. It does not border Northwest Boulevard. It's about 140 feet south of Northwest Boulevard. And then we've got an abandoned 12th Street that runs through the site where the cursor is located now. There is an 11th Street extended, would be a little bit further south. So it kind of gives you an idea north-south where this property is. Next. So the site selection process, kind of want to let you know how we got to the site that we're discussing today. So prior to spring of 2019, we had identified 10 sites under consideration for a new Brunson. We did some evaluation, we did some cost estimating, we kind of saw what that piece looked like. And in evaluating those 10 sites, basically came up empty. So Mr. Walker and I enlisted the help, some guidance from the city of Winston-Salem, reached out to the planning department of the city of Winston-Salem, some other community organizations, what was then known as the Winston-Salem Chamber of Commerce, Winston-Salem Business, Winston-Salem Foundation, some of the downtown Winston-Salem partnerships. So we enlisted some of the help from those groups as to where may be some potential properties. They in turn recommended that we have a discussion with Limble Team Partners, who was as Aubrey Limble mentioned earlier, was very in tune with the area bound by the Brunson district. So we enlisted in spring of 2019 help from Limble Team Partners, and that relationship brought to us 19 additional sites that we put into consideration, bringing the total of 29 sites that we evaluated for a new Brunson Elementary. Nick? So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Aubrey Limble, who is going to kind of tell you how we got to a site that wasn't a school site. So the site that was not occupied by an existing school. Aubrey?
Thanks, Colin. We went through a very exhaustive 4-step process to locate a site that was between 4 and 15 acres of land or developable land, or an existing building or a building that could be coming vacant in the next year or two within the Brunson School District. That resulted in 19 sites, as Colin mentioned. We then met as a team to review and rank each of those sites, which resulted in 7, what we like to call a green site. We're interested in it. We want to pursue it, take the next step. 1 yellow site, which was, gave us some pause. We weren't totally sure about it. But 11 of them, we knew immediately that they were not options that were worth considering for one reason or another. And then we took another step to assess those 7 sites. We contacted the owners at that point to find out if they were even available. When we started this process, we casted a wide a net as we possibly could. We considered sites that were on the market, off the market, pocket listings, if you will, and other opportunities that were just totally random, thinking outside of the box. Anyway, we ended up with 7. We narrowed it down to 3 green sites. We met as a team on those and started considering, peeling back more layers of the onion. And step 4, we pursued option agreements on some of those sites. And what we ended up with at the Thomasville Furniture site, located within Industry Hill, is what I believe to be the best located site within the Brunson School District that is not a existing school-owned piece of property.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Aubrey. So I want to give you some what it looks like around all 3 of these sites. This is what you see outlined in yellow is the Brunson Elementary School District. You're standing southwest, looking to the northeast. A couple things you can see in the neighborhood. You'll see Industry Hill off to the northeast, downtown Winston-Salem to the east of the Brunson District. Formerly BB&T Ballpark, now Truist Stadium, home of the Winston-Salem Dash. It's just a short drive from the existing Brunson Elementary site. Wake Forest Baptist Health is within walking distance of the existing Brunson Elementary site. So you kind of see some demographics of what's going on in that area. Nikki, hit the next slide. So what's around, I'm sorry, go back, I apologize. So some things that are around the existing Brunson site, historic neighborhoods. About almost 42% of the households in the Brunson district, not necessarily the students at Brunson, but about 42% of the households in that Brunson district have an income of greater than $50,000. You're about a 5-minute drive to downtown Winston-Salem, and you're within walking distance of Wake Forest Baptist Health. This next slide just kind of shows you some things in the neighborhood. You see the West End area in the top left. Haynes Park is within a walking distance of Brunson, and of course, as I mentioned, Wake Forest Baptist Health is within walking distance as well. Next slide. So the Cook site, as you can see, is also bound here, is in the green boundaries. This area extends from just west of Thurman Street over to just east of Highway 52. Cook is centrally located kind of a little bit toward the west of this district. A couple things in this district that's appealing. The newly constructed Paisley Lawrence Middle School is located just a short walk from Cook Literacy Model School. There's also been a Choice Neighborhoods grant that was awarded to the city of Winston-Salem that will significantly improve some of the neighborhoods that are part of the Cook district. This next slide will kind of show you, some demographics. As I mentioned, you're in walking distance to a new middle school. You are about just under 87% of the households in the Cook district, again, not representative of what's the Cook population in the school, but the households in the district have an income of just under $50,000. There are some industrial sites within this zone, and then we also mentioned the C&I grant. This next slide shows you just some visuals of the areas. You see the Paisley Lawrence School in the top left. Some of the renderings that have been produced and provided to us by the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem for this C&I grant that I mentioned was awarded to the city of Winston-Salem. Our third site for consideration is the Patterson Avenue site. You can see it highlighted in green in this area. It's actually part of a 17-acre parcel, and we are looking at about 10 of that 17 acres. 8 of the acreage is north of the former 12th Street, and about 2.5 acres is south in a little area below that 12th Street area. You see Wake Forest Innovation Quarter, downtown Winston-Salem, and an area denoted as Industry Hill. That's here. Also to the north of the property is a building that was recently constructed by Samaritan Ministries, and also the Winston-Salem Police Department Beatty Center is located just to the west of this proposed site. Next slide. As I mentioned, you've got entertainment and the innovation quarter within walking distance. Also, we have some planned residential developments that are planned that are under consideration for the same parcel. If you go to the next slide, you kind of see some of the renderings that have been provided to us by the developer that's considering some residential units that are on that adjacent site that I mentioned as part of this 17-acre parcel. The white building that's noted on that top left is about where the school, that's not the box of the school, that's the existing building that would be demolished in anticipation of construction of a school. The residential units that are planned are shown on these other slides. Next slide. So just wanted to kind of give you an update on where we are, what kind of testing has been done on the sites. There was a report of limited groundwater and soil assessment that was done on the existing Brunson site that was done on June 9th, just to give us an idea of what kind of conditions we had there. At the Cook site, we have not done any groundwater and soil assessment. There was a subsurface investigation done in 1978 that we still have records of that we reviewed in anticipation of this, and also a subsurface exploration dated of 1984 that was done by Engineering Tectonics. On the Patterson Avenue site, we have conducted a phase 1 environmental site assessment in September of 2019, and subsequently a phase 2 ESA that was done in February of 2020. As we consider the information that was provided in these testing reports, David with Gilbane will explain what implications he's taken into consideration as he was providing cost estimates. Next slide. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Wesley Curtis with Walter Robbs, who will tell you a little bit about our plans for the architectural development of a project at any of the 3 sites. Wesley?
All right, thank you, Colin. Certainly, we are really excited about the possibility of a new school on any one of the sites. And to that end, just to talk a little bit about design and design process and how the buildings might conceptually fit on the various sites. I'll be as brief as I can, rolling through this, but I thought it was important to really share with you some of the things we keep in mind no matter what site we go to. Some of the concepts or some of the thoughts that we would be looking at in developing the school as for the design of the school is concerned. One of the things that we strongly implement or try to include in all of our designs is natural light. Certainly we'd be looking at in each of these slides, I can't kind of point to them, but you can kind of see in these little slide pictures where we've got controlled natural light coming into spaces, collaboration space, whether it's just outside the classroom or within the classroom itself, flexibility, where you may have classrooms that have doors that open and close and allow various classrooms to integrate between one another, and also wayfinding. Wayfinding as well as spatial or social distancing. Try to include design within the plan itself that from a person standing there, you wouldn't necessarily notice it, but with a little instruction, you could actually use those design elements to accomplish various tasks. Like I say, whether that is wayfinding or social distancing. Right, next slide. One of the things that we tried to do in going through this, you could, just to kind of give you a reference point, starting with Brunson at Brunson, you can see here where we've got the Hawthorne on to your left, with Glade Street to the north. And the idea conceptually would be to try to locate the new school currently close to on the west side of the creek. What you see in blue or setbacks required for the creek that runs right through the middle of the site. And the whole idea is conceptually is that we would raise the entire site up above floodplain levels. But again, you can see there's a narrow sliver of where we can really kind of fit the building in there. But we would have parking on one side, playground on the other side with a bridge crossing to the playground, and then having circulation and some parking as well on the other side of the creek as well for stacking to make sure all of the traffic got off of Hawthorne Road for parent drop-off and for bus drop-off. Also in the little vignettes, well, before we go there right quickly, in the little vignettes you can kind of see here, again, what conceptually what those buildings, as far as the amount of space it would take up. It's not how necessarily the building would look, but the amount of space it would take up on the site, how it might sit. You can see from the Glade, from Hawthorne, from the creek, this kind of really shows you, if you're right there at the creek, how close the building would need to be just to fit on the site, just conceptually. All right, next slide. The next shows a site at the Brunson Cook site. And the whole idea here, just kind of orientation-wise, you can kind of see Thurman Street there to your left with the Haywood to the bottom of the sketch, the site plan. The building might lay out something like this. The idea would be to have your main focus entry at the Haywood Thurman view looking up at the site. It's kind of a beautiful view looking up there at the site with the trees and the grading. And then you would have your bus drop-off that would happen along 11th Street along the back side of the site. One of the things that's on all sites we try to do, if at all possible, is orient the building so that the classrooms are in an axis of a east-west direction, which allows us to have controlled southern sunlight and controlled northern sunlight coming into the classrooms. So a site that affords us that opportunity is really a big advantage. This site does that. All right, the next one, which is the Brunson-Patterson site. Again, and for reference points, you can see Patterson to your left, northwest, kind of further to the north of the site. But again, the building would be oriented in this fashion to kind of give us the best advantage for classroom north-south orientation for natural light. The idea would be you come in on 12th Street, parent drop-off would happen along there, bus drop-off would happen along Ivy side, and the building would be kind of nestled on the lower side of that site with playground right there at the very entry, sports field area, maybe a little bank so people could sit and watch as sports happen along there. But again, the whole idea would be open so that you could really see the entry to the building as you approach the site with parking. Again, these are vignettes that kind of show what, spatially, not necessarily what the building looks like, but how much space the building would kind of take up if you're sitting on a site with this particular concept. I think that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wesley. So we want to talk about cost for each of these three options. So as you know, they're very kind of going across. You've got a building, and the building cost is going to be basically the same, but you do have costs that are associated as you develop each of these sites. And so at this time, I'd like to bring in David Retnick, who is with Gilbane Construction Company, to kind of give us an overview of some of the costs that have been assumed for each of these sites. Dave?
Thanks, Colin. So when we looked at the 3 sites, we kind of broke it out into a couple of different areas, and we wanted to make sure we were encapsulating or capturing kind of the risk rewards for all the sites. So one of the first things that we did is we looked at what's it going to take to develop the site. The first step that we did is we applied a generic $200,000 per acre to develop any kind of site. We also took into consideration that each site's going to have some sort of demolition cost on it. And then thirdly, we looked and said that all sites will have some sort of remediation to install vapor barriers under the building pad as well. So that was kind of consistent across the 3 options. And then we started looking at the differentials. As you can see here, Brunson, what was taken into consideration, like Mr. Curtis was talking about, was the need to fill the site or bring in additional fill to raise the elevation of the site. In doing this, we then needed to consider the addition of retaining walls to hold that dirt back. And then the bridges that will cross the wetlands of the creek if running through the middle of it. Those bridges will be both pedestrian and traffic as well. So that's contributed to the 9.9 million you see there. When we looked at the Cook site, we have a site that slopes from front to back. So we said that we're going to need to build some sort of retaining walls to keep some earth back and build structure, multiple stories on one side of the wall and fewer stories on the other side of the wall. So we took that into consideration as well. When you look at the Patterson Avenue, basically it was all of the things that I said, the 3 across first, but we also included the land cost, and we also increased the demolition cost for the Patterson Avenue site because you have a larger structure that's going to need a greater amount of demolition on it. So those are the kind of factors that put into the land and site development. When we moved on to the construction, we looked at what are the constructability drivers for each site as well. At the Brunson site, we have, again, the narrow site divided in half by the creek, which drives the need for specialized equipment to move materials across the site. We would need a tower crane in that area, not for the height of the building, but just to move materials around and the space, limited space capacity. In addition, with the limited space, we feel that will drive productivity down. So the schedule would need to be longer to build the Brunson site by about 2 months as well. So that contributes to the additional construction costs at Brunson. When we look over at Cook, we realize that we're combining 2 schools, and that might lead to a factor of an additional square footage to handle more students. So really the only difference in cost there is the size of Cook would be bigger than the size of a school put at Brunson or the size of a school looked at Patterson. And then when we got to Patterson Avenue, once we demolish the building and we take care of flattening the land, it's pretty much a straight build with free and clear access, both for traffic on-site and off-site. So it's just a straight $210 per square foot cost there at Patterson Avenue. Colin?
All right, thank you, Dave. So I think also in this construction, you've also taken into account any areas identified in the testing reports from SNME around each of these sites. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So also we've got in each of these sites how many students we've assumed. At the Brunson and the Patterson Avenue sites, we've accommodated 800 students. At the Cook, being a merged school, we were anticipating 926 students. Have a little bit more information on that on a slide that follows. So some soft costs that go into this. We talk about hard costs and soft costs as they relate to construction. We kind of know what these costs would be for the construction and the site development. Some things that are considered soft costs that we run into on projects include design, what it costs to design the facility, testing services that may go into each of the 3 sites, relocation costs, if we've got to institute some swing space for accommodating students on an occupied property. We have costs for furniture for a new school, technology, and equipment. So you can see on the soft costs how they spread across for each of the sites. Total project costs showing you across the bottom now. Brunson, at Brunson's about 42 million. The site at Cook is going to be about a little over 36.5 million, and at Patterson Avenue, just over 34.5 million. Next slide. So student assignment, we'll give you some indications of how we got to the numbers that were showing up that we're assuming. So when the bond was passed in 2016, we had some, the program was for there to be 800 students for a new Brunson site. We had provided for 800 students. So we're looking at, Nick, if you can hit to the next slide. Going down. So if we look at average enrollments of each of the schools now for 2019, 2020, to kind of give you an idea of what the number of students we're dealing with now. Brunson, you got about 479. Cook is 242. The number of residential students in these areas. This is the number of students that live within each of these zones. How many students live there, even though they made choice to go to a different school. At Brunson, we've got 360 students. At Cook, we've got 344. And then there are also students that attend these schools from outside of the residential zones. At Brunson, that number for 2019, 2020 is 278, and at Cook, it's about 58. As we look at a possible Brunson-Cook merger, the capacity at that school, just some calculations that we've done based on some attendance, Nick, if you'll hit that, is for about 926 students. Next slide. So discussing the possibility of a Brunson and Cook merger if the option of a new Brunson at the Cook site is selected. Again, this only happens if the Brunson and Cook option is accepted by the Board of Education. So look at that. What happens is this is the only option in which there is boundaries that are boundary re-implications. So if we have to redraw boundaries due to this merger, this is the only option that would require that to be done. In the event that is selected, a new name will be voted on by the Board of Education. We've been asked questions about what does it look like as a new name for a Brunson and Cook merger. We have a policy in place, policy 8120, that does allow for public input of a school name, any school names that are suggested. There will need to be public notice of the Board of Education meeting in which the names will be suggested, and there will be at least one public hearing to receive and consider comments and suggestions from the public. In the event that the merger happens and they look to name a new school. Talk a little bit about relocation during construction. If the Brunson site or the Cook site are selected, question gets asked, what happens to students and staff during construction? We have basically two options that we would look at. We would possibly relocate to a swing school, which is a school that will be able to house the students and the staff during construction. The other option would be to disperse all the students that are at the school to different schools or in the zone. Ultimately, that decision would be made by the Board of Education. Next slide. As we're wrapping up the presentation, I wanted to bring to your attention that there is a survey in place where we want to get your input. As Dr. Harrison mentioned in the beginning, we want your input on these three sites. So we've got a fairly simple survey that you can access. This survey is posted on the Brunson and Cook websites, and we will be taking the information on these surveys, and we'll be accepting this information through Friday, August 28th. So we encourage you to participate in that survey. It's very user-friendly, but it also has the opportunity for you to express some comments on each of these sites. Next slide. So as we wrap up, I wanted just to kind of reinforce a couple ideas or a couple of suggestions. I think we tried to address the questions that have been presented to us. We have made this presentation to the staffs at Cook Literacy Model School and to Brunson Elementary School. You are actually, as Dr. Harrison pointed out, we do have an email address, brunsonoptions@wsfcs.k12.nc.us. And Nick, if you'll leave it up for a few minutes, I think it is scrolling on the bottom of the screen. But at this time, I would like to turn it back to Dr. Harrison or to Brent with possibly any questions.
Okay, wonderful. If you will take your screen down, or maybe you can leave that up. Mr. Campbell, Brent Campbell, do we have any questions from our viewers?
We have one quick question for you, Dr. Harrison. Asking, can the schools be designed with teacher and staff input to be reflective of the programming and curriculum, given that the sites are different?
Mr. Wesley, will you talk about that process of designing the school and how you and the staff work together to create a design?
Exactly. And well said. That's exactly the process that we go through. Once the site is selected, we spend the time to sit down both with the staff as well as our goal is to also get student input. And once we gather all that information, we will then kind of pull together thoughts and ideas and concepts that we will continue to go back to the staff, to the users, so that they can kind of see how their input has been included as we continue to develop the product. Typically, what we'd like to do is start out, we have a basic program, and now when I say that, a certain number of classrooms, a certain number of required spaces that's got to be in the program. Beyond that, we seek to look at how those things are designed. And so ideas, thoughts, concepts, we're wide open to kind of receiving those, and we have a process where we pin those up so people can actually see what everybody else has kind of said, to kind of walk through that, so everybody can be on the same page about what other people are thinking as well.
Thank you so much. Any additional questions, Mr. Campbell?
Another question is which of these sites, you laid out the sites for us, which of these sites presents the most design challenges and which one perhaps presents the least challenges?
Mr. Moore, would you like to pick up that response?
Yeah, I'll take that on with maybe a little bit of input from Wesley and Dave as well. I think we've encountered probably at the Brunson site, we're having to deal with the creek and the floodplain. I think as Wesley mentioned in his presentation, at the Cook site, we're having to deal with some topography, some issues there. And I think at the Patterson site, as you all know, we kind of have challenges everywhere we go, but there's a lot of demolition that goes in. But I think as far as the constructability, Wesley, you want to just kind of touch on what's, from a design perspective, which is the most, what you think is the best one to work with?
Well, I don't know what I want to put it in the term best one to work with, but I mean, I think that each of the sites, as you mentioned earlier, have their own challenges. I think that probably the site that has the least amount of space to actually place the building is obviously going to be the biggest challenge. It's not to say that it cannot be accomplished, but that is probably the biggest challenge. So, that being the case, obviously that is the Brunson side. But as I said, we provided concepts that, can get us through that. It's just a matter of spending the time, the effort, and the various sacrifices or various options that we'd have to look at to make it a doable site.
Yeah. And one of the things that I think community members might notice, and I did, there's a retail shop that sort of straddles the canal, but because of code changes, we could not do anything like that with the school. We'd have to make those adjustments based on the new code changes. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
And then we certainly value, so the purpose of, again, this presentation was to provide you an opportunity to ask questions, clarify, the projects, and then respond to a short survey. So at this time, the location of the survey, if you'll, Mr. Campbell, remind us where the survey link is located.
So we are going to place the survey on both of the school websites, the Brunson website and the Cook website, and then we'll also be emailing it in communication from the schools directly to parents and families as well. So you'll have that information also coming to your messaging soon. We do have two more quick questions, Dr. Harris.
Sure.
Came in.
Sure.
The first one is from a Brunson parent, and this one is asking, why is a Cook-Brunson merger not being considered for the Patterson Avenue location?
That is a good question. Would you like to respond to that, Mr. Walker or Mr. Moore?
I'll speak up. I'll let Daryl chime in if he'd like. I don't think anything would be off the table. We certainly have the capability at the Patterson site to build a larger facility. The 10.5 acres that we currently have under option would allow us to do that. I think that would be something that we would possibly look to for some direction on if that was something you'd like for us to consider.
So please add that in the survey as feedback. We'd like to share that with our board.
Okay, are you ready? We've got another one.
Yes.
This is from another parent. It says, can you please speak to the environmental issues, perhaps at the Patterson Avenue location that's proposed? I have some serious concerns about an elementary school at a brownfield site.
Okay. Would you all speak to that?
I will. I'll start that off and ask Dave if you can just kind of maybe summarize again what concessions you have made in your cost estimates to address any concerns that may have been identified in the testing reports that were provided by SNME.
Can do. So basically what we've looked at is a vapor intrusion system under every school system foundation there. So basically what we want to do is protect the footprint of the school, and then with the construction of the land around it over fields and parking lot to isolate areas of any questionable or concern. But every school has been included with some sort of remediation costs for these vapor barriers at each option.
And I'm going to ask.
Would you take a moment to explain to our viewers and the Brownsfields, what does that mean? That's a program, and it's not the name of the site, it's the program. And can you explain why that designation would be necessary, what the process might look like, and how that gets approved?
Yes, ma'am. I'll be glad to, and I'm going to ask Wayne Watterson, who is also on the call, to be willing to jump in. But basically, a brownfields is a program. It's a brownfields program. It's not a description of a site. So what the brownfields program does, it's a product of the environment, of the EPA, of the Environmental Protection Agency, that's administered locally by the North Carolina Division of Environmental Quality. And that program allows you to take sites that could possibly have some issues with some soil conditions that may not be able to be developed without the involvement of the brownfields program. So basically what the brownfields program does is it takes on the liability by addressing these concerns, and as Mr. Repnick mentioned, installing devices or products that would allow you to mitigate that vapor. So the vapor intrusion that we've installed would address the concerns that have been identified in the reports by SNME. And Wayne, I'm going to ask if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Colin, I think you did that very well. I think one thing to add is what we did find at the Patterson site was pretty typical of an urban location. I think any type of construction in an urban area, there's going to be some challenges there, and we didn't find anything that would create a special kind of construction that couldn't be done from. And Dave, you may want to jump into this a little bit too, but what we found at Patterson was should not prohibit any kind of good, safe construction at that site for a school.
And I think, Dave, you've been involved in projects around the state where also there was a brownfields program in place, so you're familiar with what the requirements of the DEQ would be?
Correct. So basically, typically what would happen, it really goes back to that vapor barrier system underneath the slab. And then if we have any areas of concern throughout the rest of the site, that's where we're going to strategically work to design to basically encapsulate those areas with removal of a few feet of dirt, putting a few feet of dirt back, and then asphalt on top of that to encapsulate it. So it goes back into the identification of the areas, taking care of that building pad first, and then strategically locating parking lots and things to encapsulate areas of concern throughout the route. There's not going to be anything that's unique to this site specifically that we wouldn't, as Mr. Watterson said, that we would find in any urban site.
Mr. Campbell, additional questions?
That wraps up the questions that we have at this point, Dr. Hairston.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for being on our, participating in our meeting today to talk about the new Brunson Elementary School. And I can't say enough about the excitement around this new school. And our job is to secure feedback from our community. We've already received surveys from both Cook Elementary staff and Brunson Elementary staff. And we will add that communication to our Board of Education presentation for a final decision, or hopefully a final decision in September. But I want to especially thank the team that put together the meeting today, and we will convene 2 other times for feedback. Again, thank you, and we will see you soon.